Hi there, thanks for joining me today. My name's Jo and I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator based in the UK. Now this is one of my Monday Mashup sessions where we incorporate various different elements. So we have various stamp sets or dies or whatever. So it's various products that we have in the current Stampin' Up collection which are brought together to create our final project. So for this week we're using 3 stamp sets. So I'm using Gnome for the holidays, which is obviously our little gnome here. I'm also using the Forever Fern, which is one of my favourite stamp sets, and it goes so well with so many different projects. One that I really would not want to be without, to be honest. So these are these leaves here, these 2 that I'm using, and I've also used this little dotty one here, which is these little dots you can see in the background there. And then finally the Peace and Joy stamp set, and we're just using the greetings from here. I love these block sort of greetings. I think they give it a really nice sort of folk feel, and with the heart and everything, I think it looks really nice. And with the hearts, this is what we're using, the Be Mine stitched framelits, and it's the largest heart, which is the black one, and then the second largest is the crumb cake one. So that's what we're using there. So this time I thought it'd be fun to actually do the card in more of a landscape feel. So we're going to be doing it sort of this way. This is crumb cake, and I've cut this. When I'm doing a landscape card, I tend to do it with my fold at the side. It tends to stand up a lot better, whereas if it's at the top, sometimes they can get a bit heavy and fall over. So this is my landscape. It's the full length of an A4 sheet that's cut at 10.5 centimetres and then scored at 14.85 to give me my card base. You're then going to need a piece of very vanilla cardstock, and this is where we're going to stamp our leaves. And this measures 14.85 by 5 centimetres. And also a piece of basic black. Now I have cut this very slightly wider because if you notice I'm only using one edge here. Okay, and as I say, the largest heart is cut from basic black, the next largest is cut from crumb cake, and then you're going to need just a few odds and ends of very vanilla, which we're going to use to stamp our gnome and our greetings on here. Okay, so we're going to start off with our leaves. So I'm taking my piece of very vanilla. Now what I want to do is use a sort of combination of colours. You can't see it overly clearly on here, but it does make a difference when you are stamping it. So you can see here I've got a slight bit darker on the edges. It just adds that sort of two-tone. It pulls in all my colours from my gnome, which is what I wanted to do. So I'm using Just Jade and Pretty Peacock. So they, tonal wise, they go really nice together. They just sort of complement each other really nicely, and I think it gives that nice sort of woodlandy sort of feel to the leaves, etc. So as I say, I've got the two leaves. They face different directions, so that's why I'm using both, because sometimes when you're doing a random effect, if they're all facing the same way, it's sometimes harder to make them look more random. So that's why I'm using both. So I'm going to start off with Just Jade. So I've just inked my stamp in Just Jade, and I'm just going to tap the tops of my leaves with Pretty Peacock. Now you may find that you get some ink onto your blocks, that's inevitable, but it's not going to affect where we're stamping, so don't worry about that. So I'm stamping that one first. I'm going to do a second one with this particular stamp, tapping the darker edge on it, and then I'm going to stamp it down. I'm then going to go over to my other one. As I say, it just makes a nice mixture because you've got your stems going in opposite directions then. Okay, so you can see they sort of complement each other then. And again, just going to go in the centre that time. I'm going to flip back to my other one just very quickly. And I'm just going to make sure that I'm stamping off the edge of the page. This is really important because if you just stamp into the middle, it doesn't look particularly lifelike. And if you look at anything, greeting paper, wallpaper, anything, it will go off the edge of the page. And that's just designed to sort of give it an overall effect. So it's just a little tip just to make it all fit nicely together. And just one more, and I'm just going to pop that one up the top there. Okay, so that's our leaves done. I'm now going to take the actual little dotty stamp. So this is just random dots. Now I don't want necessarily all of the dots every single time because it's a reasonable size. I want to fit into the gaps. So I'm using Pretty Peacock, and I'm literally just going to push in on the side. So I'm not stamping straight down, I'm sort of stamping at a slight angle, and it just means I get a nice selection without going over too much on anything else. And again, don't forget to go off those edges. So any little gaps, I'm just going to add a couple of little dots. It doesn't have to be much, it's just to add a little bit of interest to it really. Again, just on the side. Because they're random dots, it really doesn't matter, and it just adds a little bit of interest to it. Okay, so I've actually finished with those ink pads now, so I'm going to pop those out of the way. I'll have a little clear up later. Just going to quickly wipe my finger. There we go. So that's our section here done. So now I can glue that onto my black section. I haven't decided whether I'm going to have my black at the top or bottom at the moment, but it doesn't matter at this stage until I can actually put it together. So I'm just adding some glue to my Very Vanilla, and then I'm going to glue it onto my black, and I'm just going to stand it up on the table to make sure that they've lined up nicely together. Okay, so that's that section finished. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do my gnome. So I just need to take a piece of spare Very Vanilla, can just be a little bit of scrap here, and I'm going to take my black memento and ink my gnome. Now, if you wanted to, you could do a Very Vanilla heart instead of the crumb cake, and then you could actually just colour it and leave it on the heart if you wanted to. I just wanted to add a dimension to it, which is why I've done it on to Very Vanilla and then I've cut it out. It is a little bit fiddly to cut out, but if you take your time, then I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. So I'm using a combination of pens today. So these are the selection I'm using. So we have Pretty Peacock in light and dark. I have Just Jade in light and dark. I have Grey Granite in light and dark. My colour lifter, and then just to add a little bit of pink to his hands and his face, I've got the light Flirty Flamingo. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the Just Jade section. So this I have used to colour his outfit here. This is a really small section, but I'm just going to start off with my dark pen and just start colouring in the edges. I'm then going in with my light one. Now, these don't require a lot of blending because they're so small an area that you don't really sort of notice whether they're blended or not, to be honest. So that's all I needed those for. If you don't have the blends for that little section, you could use markers if you've got markers. Okay, I'm then going to move over to my grey. Now, I want to first do my little bell up here. Now, if you're worried about cutting that little bell out, you can just remove it, so don't feel too under pressure. I'm just going to add some dark to one side, and then I'm going to add some light, And notice I've just left a little white area here. This is just to create our shadow, and I'm going to come in with my colour lifter and just remove a little bit more. Now, whilst that's wet, you won't really notice it, but you'll see once that dries, that will start removing some of that colour. So again, I'm using my light one, and this time I'm just want to create some shadows. So I'm adding a little bit to his moustache, either side of his nose, and I'm also underneath his moustache, underneath his nose. And notice I'm just using little flicking sort of motions really. And I'm also just going to add odd little bits against the sort of flow of his actual beard. Again, it's just to add a little bit of shadow to it. I'm also going to add a little bit on his hands. You'll see why in a second. And again, I'm going to take my colour lifter, and where I've added those grey, with the exception of his hands for the moment, I'm just going to go over the ends. So where my grey pen ended, I'm just going in with the colour lifter. Now the reason I'm doing this is just to blend it really, so it doesn't look so, you don't really see the pen marks. You then start to sort of see the shadow you're trying to create. Okay, so I've done that. I'm now going to add some little pink. So over my grey that I've put on his hands here, I'm just going to add some pink over the top, because the pink is quite pink. So I want to, I've toned it down with the grey. And again, the colour lifter, just to add a little bit of interest. And again, I'm going to do the same with his nose. So a little bit of light great granite. And a little bit of the pink over the top. And I'm just going to add a little bit pink to his face as well. And then on his nose, I just want to lose that harsh line. So I'm just colouring it until sort of you just get that pink sort of tinge to the left of his nostrils. This will lighten once it's dried, and then we can see if we need to add back a little bit more pink. Sometimes it takes out too much. I want it to be a hint, so I don't want it too sort of deep. So now I've done that, I can remove those, and I'm going to go on to my pretty peacock blends. Now these are what we're going to do most of it. Now for his feet, I did colour the whole lot in, because there is a sort of line almost as if he's got a, I don't know, top of a boot or something, but I've coloured it all in the same colour for this particular card. And all I'm doing first is just adding some colour just to where I think the shadow would be. So it would be created by his beard really. So once I've done that, I'm just going to add some of the lighter colour, but concentrate where they join. So I've added that colour and you can see it's quite stark. Now if I just concentrate where they join, you'll find that they then blend nicely together. Okay, so I'm going to do the same for his hat. So again, you want to sort of decide where you think the light source may come from, or you know, sometimes our stamps have little lines on so you can see instantly. This particular one doesn't, but I know that if I looked at something, the edges would be darker than what the middle would be. So I'm just, again, just adding some dark, coming in with the light. Now I'm going to colour this in centre all over virtually, apart from a little sort of section in the middle here. And again, I'm going back over where those colours meet, because I want those to blend nicely. Now, if you add too much of this at once, it will have a tendency to bleed. So just be careful when you're adding it down. This isn't so bad because we're cutting it out, so it doesn't matter if it bleeds a little bit. But if you were doing it direct onto a card, then obviously you wouldn't want that to happen. Okay, so got those to blend. Now I'm going to go in just with a little bit more dark in these corners. Now this is damp through the alcohol from the pens, you'll find that they will blend so much better. Okay, so I'm going to take my colour lifter again, and this time I want to just blend in these harsh edges here. So this is kind of where the light's catching the actual hat itself, so it just sort of blends in. If it's a little bit too stark, so if it's not sort of blending fully, just go back in with a little bit of the dark, and then you can start sort of blending that through, and again add a little bit of the light to any edges that have sort of disappeared a little bit. It's just playing, really, just getting them to blend really nicely together. You see this is starting to bleed. This is because I'm laying down an awful lot of colour here. Normally, as I say, I would allow my layers to dry just a little bit, just to avoid that happening. As I say, we are cutting this out, so I'm not too worried about that. So I'm going to take my scissors and I want to cut out my gnome, but I want to cut him out completely. So I'm not leaving a border on this one. So again, if you've watched any of my videos before, if you're cutting, you want to be moving your paper and not your scissors. So your scissors, you're just doing the up and down motion, and then the card is actually what you're moving within your scissors. Okay, and remove any excess you have, because it just tends to get in the way. And also hold your scissors at a very slight angle, which means that your cut sort of goes under the paper rather than like a flat cut onto it. There we go. So that's our little gnome cut out. So the next thing you notice, I've got some speckles on the back of my card. So I'm just going to remove this out of the way for a second, because we're going to make a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to bring in my base card, make sure I've got my fold on the correct side. And I'm going to take my dark Pretty Peacock blender pen and the brush end. Now all I'm doing is very lightly just flicking this on the side of the actual lid. Now it does go all over the place, so you do need to be a little bit careful, but just try and you know, as directional as you can onto your card. Okay, so I'm quite happy with that. Just be a little bit careful of your nibs. You don't obviously want to flatten them too much, but provided you're careful, you can easily achieve that. Okay, so now that's done, I'm going to have this in landscape, as I've said. So I need to decide whether I'm going to have my little black line at the top or at the bottom. So I'm going to try it at the top to start with, see what we think. And my heart's going to go here. And then my gnome will probably go at a slightly different angle on here. Can you see I've got a little bleed on his nose? I'm just going to go in with my blender again. Now if you get this, what you want to do is push the colour away. So just push it to the outside edge, because you want it to go in that direction. Let that dry, and then we can go back in and have another look if it's still not quite right. Okay, so I'm going to add my thread first of all. So I'm going to take a piece of double-sided tape, and this is our tear tape, and I'm just going to pop a piece onto either side of my black. Just going to remove the backing off my tape. I add tape, you don't have to do this part, but I add tape to hold my thread purely because it's easier, I find, to have it held in place. So this is just our linen thread here. and I'm going to be having mine at the top. So I'm going to start off with a piece over the top here, which is the piece that's going to tie my bow, and then I want to wrap this twice around. Okay, and then I can just stick it onto wherever I've put my tape. Just going to make sure I've got plenty to tie my bow with. Okay, so this is my my piece here. Now what I'm going to do is actually glue this into place now, and then I can actually do my tie-in afterwards. So I'm just going to add some glue to the reverse. And position this onto my card. Just making sure that I've held on to those two ends. Now I've stuck it probably just short of a centimetre up from the bottom, but it doesn't really matter, just wherever you want to stick it really. Just making sure that that's stuck down nicely. My thread's all nice and taut. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to tie my bow. So I tend to use a glue dot. I find this, again, holds your thread in place while you're trying to actually tie it up. And I want my bow sort of around here, so I'm just going to stick that down. I'm going to tie this into a knot and then put my knot directly over that glue dot. So that's going to hold that in place. So now, as I try and put this together and tie my bow, I know it's not going to move anywhere. So I'm just tying my bow. This linen thread, because it's on a roll, tends to do this curl, which is quite nice sometimes. Other times it is a bit of a nuisance. So I'm just going to trim the ends off. These obviously aren't my ribbon scissors. There we go. So that's my bow tied, and again, just going to push that down, and then hopefully that will hold it a little bit flatter. The next thing I want to do is to stick my heart on. Now, where this has got the linen thread underneath it, on this particular card, I actually threaded it through the top. So it's raised slightly. So on that basis, I'm going to raise my my black heart here, because I think it needs that lift. Otherwise, it's not going to sort of lay flat. So I will glue this section, and I will put dimensionals under these top parts here. So I'm going to stick 3 just on the top section here. Okay, and I'm just going to add some glue to that bottom. So when this sticks over the top, you'll see that this is flat and this is just slightly raised off the top. Now this one lays completely flat. And then I'm going to stick my little gnome onto dimensionals, and I think I might have him here and have our Happy Christmas, and then put to you and yours sort of over here. So I'm going to add some 3D foam to him. Now you can get away with doing 2 sort of on his body, and then I do need to cut one here just for his top part. So there we go. So he's going to stick sort of here, just off to that side. And then need to stamp my greeting. So as I say, these are from the Peace and Joy stamp set, and I'm just using black memento for these onto a scrap of Very Vanilla. The reason I've used Very Vanilla is I felt that white was a little bit stark for this design. He needed to be sort of more subtle really, so that's why I've used Very Vanilla. gives it that sort of more woodlandy feel. Okay, so you do need with these stamps to make sure that you've got a really nice even coating of ink on them, otherwise they don't come out properly. So just take your time just to ink them, and then you'll find you'll be fine. Okay, so I'm just going to cut these quickly. Okay, so that's our greetings stamped. Now you can obviously arrange them wherever you want to arrange them, really. I think I quite like that under there. Now on the original card I actually mounted these as 3D, but my hearts were flat, where my heart on here is slightly raised, so I think I'm going to stick my greetings down flat because I think that will complement it better, really. So I'm just going to add some just Tombow glue, and I am going to take a little pair of tweezers just to help me hold them, or not, just in case maybe. Oh, these aren't my usual tweezers I pick up actually, so that's my excuse. I'm just going to go off slightly there, and then to you and yours, which I'm just going to, I think I like it sort of here, just off to one side. So there we go. So as I say, this was the original one, so this was our one we were working from, and this is it in the landscape format, and I think either look really pretty. So I hope you like that today, and I hope it's given you some ideas, and I will see you next week for another Monday mashup. Thanks for watching. Bye.